Hello, everyone.
How Tashi and me thought we'll take this session is we'll uh, talk to each other a little bit, and after that, we'll open the floor for discussion. Actually, it took me a lot of time to call Tashi as Tashi because I always knew her as Navdeep. So it's very difficult for me to get used to the new name. But if of all the people who are coming to this Dodin, I think Tashi represents the most precarious of all slopes, and he has had many of them. So I would be talking to Tashi about all these things. So how do we go about this? Because I thought we'll start with your childhood.
Okay,
Start
sounds
with
boring, but
Nalgonda.
fine.
No, I don't think it's boring. No, we didn't have a formal introduction about Tashi primarily because we want you to go on with his journey, and then you'll find how the identity and the challenges change at every stage of the life. And now, from he to she to they, the whole gender conversation also will change accordingly. So we'll start with your childhood from Nalgonda.
Fair. So yeah, I'm kind of. I was born in Hyderabad, but raised in Nalgonda for quite some time, and then we've shifted to Hyderabad, of course, to say that for my education, our education, me and my brother. And then more or less for a long time I lived in Hyderabad, on and off away from Hyderabad, but mostly with family in Hyderabad. And to say as much as my have a life of whatever uh, precarious life of many identities, but as a child I think I was very boring, very obedient, mostly kind of the teacher's student, and also probably because that's my safe space back then. I did not feel safe at school. I certainly did not feel very much safe around my own age group children, and my cousins or otherwise. So that way, I more or less relied on. I mean, one thing that made sense to me, or that one thing that kept me grounded in this world, is the faith. And when I say faith, it it was on it still is in many things. As much as I'm a Buddhist monk now, it doesn't limit my faith to be limited to Buddhism alone, I would say. And as a child, I've born in a Hindu family and practiced Hinduism for a good long time, I believe, and then been a disciple of a Christian monk, a Christian monk who was a monk in Indian Hindu tradition, I think. And then, of course, to go on to become get ordained in Tibetan Buddhist tradition is another thing. Yeah, I mean that way. Yeah, I'm pretty inconsistent with things, but that's how it has been.
I'd like to take back on that particular point, take you back to that. Why did you not feel safe?
Safe in a sense. I mean, a lot of things did not make sense to me. I mean, a lot of things don't make sense to me even now. In case, for example, to go to school and act in a certain way, behave in a certain way, and I am not that child. I wasn't that child, a normal child who would act in a certain way. And then I had a twin brother who where we. I mean, we were identical twins, and certainly there is this idea of that all I should also man up and act like my brother all the time, and like be more manly, not be feminine, and talk in a certain way, and walk in certain way, and all that, I think. And then there was kind of bullying, which I do not know that it was bullying, because my teachers and also my parents apparently told it's me who is supposed to change, and that is, I mean, that is when the rest of the things will probably are supposed to change. So that way I did not feel safe at school, as in and also because I did not knew it as bullying, but there was a great deal of discomfort to go to school every day. So I pretty much tried to avoid not to go to school, and that's the reason I think I don't feel so comfortable with institutions even today. Like,
So basically, it was your a comparison with your twin brother that was also a pressure on you.
with everyone else, with everyone, with every regular school going boy, but certainly with my brother, because he is immediate. looks exactly like me, but I'm certainly so much different from him. So I'm expected also to behave like him because I look like him. So the immediate pressure is because of certainly my brother, I would say that.
So how did you negotiate these kind of challenges that you had? How did you try and convince people that this is how I am?
Actually, I did not. For a
Okay.
long time, I did not try convincing anything or anyone in a way to say that I was in school, I was in home, and then certainly I have. I mean, most of the time I used to be secluded in my own place, praying or meditating or whatever that made me feel safe. That's where my faith meant being with myself and being feeling safe. That was the first relationship that I have with my faith. So that way, that's the only refuge I always had, I think. Yeah.
So how did you proceed from there in your higher education? What kind of challenges you faced, and when did you decide to own up whatever you are?
So when I joined college just today morning, I was on my way to here. I was visiting Nizam College where I studied. It's still like kind of yeah, a place where I go talk to my old professors and teachers. So that is where I did my undergrad, and that is where my work started, activism, and also there were teachers who were kind enough to encourage me and support me, and also that is where I also happened to come out when I was studying. A little at the end of my graduation, I was able to come out about my gender and sexuality, blah blah, and then yeah, kind of. I mean, that's where my journey of working started, but also that is where my first resistance in the family, saying that my dad wanted me to be a doctor, and I said no, I'm not really willing to be a doctor for you or anyone. I can't. And then he's like, okay, yeah, my immediate uh, option is that you have your elder son, he'll be doctor for you, let me be free now. I mean, like, I'll do what I want to do. I mean, you have an option. So that's how I think I was free. Then I did my undergrad in social sciences. Well, also of course my dad is still embarrassed about it because yeah, I'm the only child in the entire family who did I mean, studied something like social sciences. Why? I mean, what would you do with it? So it doesn't make sense to him, to anyone at home. And then whatever activism I got into, that is where I got into in the college. So yeah,
What kind of activism?
my initial beginning work was with Caring Citizens Collective, which used to work with farmer suicides. My volunteering days began with them, working with families where there were suicides, for farmer suicides, and then rehabilitating, supporting them, and advocacy and policy and all that. So that was my first initial work with Caring Citizens Collective, and then continued on to with palliative care in Hyderabad with MNJ Cancer Hospital and Pain Relief Palliative Care Society, and then on gender and sexuality, of course, which is much more personal to me as much as it is activist and political. It is also extremely personal, having that I identify as gay, I identify as genderqueer, navigating my own gender through my gender and sexuality, and being able to come out and talk about it, and work with the community through that.
What exactly was a turning point when you decided to identify with your real gender, how you felt about it?
I mean, there's no turning point as such, I think, but there's a time when I was living in this village near Vikarabad where I was working with the community, teaching in a government school, thinking this is fine to live in a village. Cities, I mean, like, as much as this is a urbanization conference, cities really kind of intimidate me always. So I kind of try to go away to small, calm places. So when I was living in that village and working and thinking that, oh, sexuality, gender, this is all not my thing. I can live in a village and happily teach and whatever, not know to the world and not really need to know to the world and work, live. That's when suddenly I think I got to hear a news where there was a young Kashmiri student who committed suicide in English and Foreign Language University, and that was whatever the reasons. One of the reasons that came out into the light that he was gay and he was harassed for that by the management and all that. That is when it triggered a lot of conflict within me. What I'm thinking to be this personal thing, not to really be bothered about it, suddenly started bothering me, and that is when I moved out of the village, came to Hyderabad, decided to talk to my parents about it. And yeah, first because I wanted to also come out to them, I think. I did think of coming out to them much before, but during that time, my brother passed away. So I really couldn't come up with the courage to talk to them about it, I think. And then, but much later, I decided this is how it is, and there's nothing I can do about it other than talking about it.
How did it go? It's not
Uh,
very easy for.
oh, my father, it's in a sense, my father was this huge Ayappa devotee, so I kind of put the thing on him that you see, you worshipped a god who was born for two men, so this is what happens when you do that. So you really can't. And then next day morning, he asks me, "Oh, did you ever have sex with a woman?" I mean, like, no. I mean, like, do you want to try? I mean, like, I was like, okay, dad. I mean, like, that's a good question. Keep it aside. And did you ever have sex with men? I mean, like, he made a face. Then I like, would you like to try? Because if you want to confirm you're not, gay or homosexual, and this all conversation was happening in Telugu, not in Hindi, English, or anything. So it was certainly as much as difficult for me, difficult also for him to have such a conversation in Telugu, where I mean, like, coming from a family, we certainly never talk about sex, talk certainly about sexuality, and then, have a conversation around, you want to have sex, I want to have sex stuff is quite so yeah. And then he always did, also because he comes from little medical background, so he immediately thought, let's go to your doctor, we'll have you fixed. I mean, like, I'm always ready to go to a doctor and talk to you, because if that comforts you, if that helps you, I don't mind. But then he always only brought that up, I think, whenever he used to see me in a newspaper, in a news channel. Then he rings me up out of nowhere. He's very angry, furious, like, let's go, this is not working. And I'm like, a conversation doesn't work like this. If you want to talk, we'll talk, but not because you're angry and not because you saw me somewhere and you're embarrassed about it. That is not how we're going to talk. So kind of he still struggles. But one of my teacher puts, a Buddhist nun, she says, your dad must be now quite relieved because you don't wear saris and you wear robes. See, it is more acceptable than wearing saris. So I don't
But I
know.
loved you in a sari.
I still do miss my saris.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you talk only about your father. How about your mother?
My
How
mother,
about your other relatives with whom you had to
re-
deal with?
relatives, I think I'm the youngest in my cousins. So none of my cousins do talk to me actually. There's never a possibility of conversation. They all are married and have children. They all possibly think I'm this one evil influence on their children, or would be a possible evil influence on their children. So they keep a distance, which I fair enough understand. I won't say anything. My mother, as much as because again she's slightly a heart patient, my father is overprotective. Do not have these conversations with her. Do not bring things like this at home and all that. But I'm sure she know what is happening. But as much as because it is wife and husband, we want to deal it our way. So you kind of stay out of it. So I'm like, okay, I'm staying out of it if that is what you want. So I mostly stay out of that.
After this admission to your family, when did you start activism in this area? I know you have done a lot of things for the LGBTQ community. I would like you to tell us about them, and when did you start, and what all did you do? Because I remember you at the Hyderabad Literary Festival showing all those films that were made for the community and
No,
the gay pride and everything. So I'd like you to talk about them.
so I mean, like, I decided to work with the community, and that is the reason I think it's a simultaneous decision that I want to work with the community. So before I begin working with the community, I decided I want to come out to my father. So then that is when I ended up telling him, because I didn't want him to know it from anyone else and then make a huge mess about it and all that. Then I came out to him, and then immediately, went on, started going to community meetings, which slowly started right then in Hyderabad, I think. And then we just had our first Pride, I think, a little before that. And yeah, one of the I started working independently. Then, of course, I joined Anveshi Research Center for Women Studies. So, as part of Anveshi, my work was also to work with the community, organizing community events, programs, and also working with media, especially regional media, talking about how do you basically need to report the issues around LGBT community, and how do you do things, what it means, what does your reporting mean to the community, and what does our conversations about us in media mean to us. Interestingly, I think this was almost a decade back, around 2008. TV9 did a sting operation on this one dating site of gay men where it outed many people, displayed their photographs on TV, and shamed them and everything, and it was quite violent otherwise. And after a decade exactly, I think now, 2000, as we end 2017, I'm sitting in Bodh Gaya and I was like, oh, I need to see some Telugu news. I might forget speaking Telugu. So I put on, of all the channels, I don't know why I choose to put on TV9, and I put on TV9 live on YouTube. And then there is this huge thing, Veedu Teda, is a screen where wife complaining about husband being homosexual and the anchor talking about it. And I mean, after a decade, it's the same thing that they talk and the same language they use, nothing has changed. I mean, like, what did I exactly do, or what did any of us exactly do in this entire? I mean, like, as much as precarious nature, we talk about things changing and impermanent. TV9 seems to be quite permanent about their stance and whatever they want to do about us. So, you know, so that way, as much as work we think we are doing, I think there's need of lot more work.
That's very true. You know, a lot of people still don't have the right notions about this, and you can't even accept transgender working in your own organization. It's very, very difficult for a lot of organizations to give employment.
Not really.
So, but there are certain initiatives. I think you know about them. Like in Kerala, you have a special.
Kerala, yes, I mean, states are, some states are coming up with things and doing things, but at a smaller level, I mean, we are talking about where states are doing things at policy level where they never actually reach grassroots and actually manifest into reality in people's everyday lives. I mean, it doesn't happen at all. Like, for example, just in Nizam College, I was talking about talking to a professor where she was talking about they are doing this International Women's Congress, talking about higher education for women in universities and all that. They're planning to do some international women's congress around that, and I've asked them, I'm like, are you planning to include gender as part of your thing? And if you're including, have about a dialogue about transgender, trans women, I won't even talk about the entire trans spectrum, but just trans women's education. Then they're like, I don't think they are willing to do that. I mean, like, okay. I mean, like, that is where we are. As much as we talk about this yeah, complete policy level making, government doing changes, and then, oh, bringing the transgender rights protection bill is now happening, which is a bizarre bill. I don't know why it is happening. And but at grassroots level, there is nothing happening in a sense. We activists, whatever we do, but how much is it impacting everyday lives of people it's an everyday struggle. Like, for example, in Bodh Gaya where I live, there is transgender community, and after my 1 month of stay in the institute where I live, we run a community healthcare center. I asked these institute people, uh, can I talk to trans community over here and ask them to come to the clinic, that they're welcome and they can get tested and use the medical services here? And then they were very cautious. I mean, like, I don't think we can do that. We need to have a meeting, discuss. I mean, like, it's a hospital and it's a public clinic, community healthcare center. And I'm going to actually ask someone living in the community to come and access same services everyone else has access. Why do we need a meeting around it? I mean, they're scared. I mean, they're really scared. I mean, I don't think we can do that. I don't know what other patients will think, what other things will go on. There is so much fear actually to even let in and access basic health service, and that they go.
Mainstreaming is still a very big problem.
Yeah.
I wanted to again go back a little bit. You did work with Anveshi,
Yes.
and Anveshi is an open organization and would welcome such people.
Yeah.
But what is the situation in employment? You know, a lot of people who are, who are openly gay, they don't get employment.
I mean, people who are LGB, they will get employment as long as they are not visibly queer. It's easy for a lesbian woman or a gay man or bisexual person to get employment, and also because all these great MNCs have this so-called inclusive policies which talk about employing people of different sexuality and gender and all that. But you would never find actually transgender people who are visibly transgender being employed anywhere. I mean, it's too much disruptive to their respectable, dignified working spaces. Like, to have someone like that who is visibly transgender and not know actually how to talk to them. It's basically the inability of able to accommodate them and respect them with with the dignity that they deserve rightfully. And then we don't, instead of giving employment and going through all the struggle and wanting to change our system, our way of communication, our way of operating, let us not even give employment in the first place. And that is simple, I think. So most of the corporates don't have I mean, people who are educated, I mean, like who are post graduations, double post graduations, friends who don't who are not employed, who don't find employment. And people who are employed, if they end up coming out, they are thrown out of their jobs for one or the other reason, never explicitly for the reason of being transgender person.
Then how do they manage? I know, especially people coming from less endowed backgrounds, they
Sex
suffer.
work and begging, these are the only two traditional livelihoods the transgender community, trans women community, especially not trans men, but trans women community has always had. And again, now of course the whatever the so-called transgender rights protection bill is going to come into the parliament, which will illegalize begging, criminalize begging. I think that is what the bill proposes. So because we will not provide you employment, but you can also not go on to streets and creating ruckus that we assume as ruckus. So yeah.
Why do you say for trans women and not trans men? Trans men find it easier to get
No, I mean,
employment?
they don't find it easy to get employment, but they can't certainly go into sex work and begging easily. It's more unsafe to them because trans men, trans women, as much as they are trans women, but there is a certain amount of privilege of male gender being assigned at birth, and it's a different dynamics altogether work, and they culturally, traditionally have communes like a Hijra, Kinnera, Aravani groups that have lived together, operate as a collective, whereas trans men don't have such kind of collective.
Okay, so then what do they do? I mean, I'm interested in.
I'm not. I won't be the right person to answer also because I'm not a trans man in the first place. But with the friends who I have, they're slowly forming collectives, trying to come up together and have make their own spaces and have dialogue and navigate through it. I think that is what is happening in recent times.
Okay, and after uh, working with Anveshi and working for activism for this, today, I mean, I suddenly find you as a monk. So what happened in the interim?
What happened in the interim, I don't know how straightly or simply to put it, because nothing is so straight about my life as I look at it. So uh, I don't know. Like as I said, faith is one thing that has always kept me grounded and kind of gave me this sense of belongingness in life. Otherwise, I would have very much confirmed an alien who dropped out from a spaceship or probably somewhere else. But yeah, faith kept me grounded in this world for a long time. Even now, it does. Then faith, whether it is Hindu or whether a different faith, I've practiced, studied, whatever I did. And then of course I got into this activist field where progressive, liberal, rational activists, who talk about change, liberal, politics, this, that, and everything. You can't really talk about your faith, because faith is not something we activists really dwell in, because that is something. Faith for all us activists is just Hinduism, because we live in a Hindutva country, as the so-called whatever Hindu groups assert, and we also pretty much easily agree with and say that that is only faith. So faith is not something we'll talk about. Faith is not something we'll have a dialogue about. That is regressive. That is altogether not something to be not touched. So I found it kind of difficult. Okay, this is the space I want to work in, but I certainly can't talk about a large component of my life that is about my faith and how it actually helped me to live through and survive every day in and out of the life that I live. So that was a tricky thing for me. And wherever I'm visibly this person who talks about faith, or Hindu or non-Hindu, whatever, it's kind of difficult for people to, even the fellow activists who knew me, it was difficult for them to really kind of, okay, we can also sit and actually just talk about it, not necessarily agree with it, but we neither will talk about it, nor there's no point of someone talking and we just simply sitting and hearing that, listening. That is also not the possibility. So that I kind of slightly, then okay, I'll not talk about it because this work is important and this is where I need to work, so I'll not talk about it. I'll keep it to myself. That's what I did for a long time. And then of course, eventually, as I started working in the activist groups, we even within the LGBT communities, I mean, I call it communities because I don't see it as one community, as most of the people would like to put it, because LGBTQ, I mean, as much as they have their commonalities among each other, they are entirely different entities, and we cannot say that they are one single community by any means. Even within the LGBT community, what I've seen is that we have so much suffering that goes on, and in our own individual lives. So when we come together as people, as individuals, as much as we want to resist, protest, fight, and gain acceptance, love, this, that, and everything, end of the day, we don't have what we offer each other mostly is also the suffering that we go through, and we don't have any other kind of support systems, and our communities also work like mafias, because in these very community spaces, what we call communities, for you to fit into this community, you again need to have follow certain kind of norms and rules and regulations, which have constantly couldn't do in the so-called heteronormative straight world, and certainly come into a queer community space wanting to have a space where I don't need to really subscribe to so norms and rules and regulations, and it turns out to be entirely different, that I certainly and much more seriously need to actually agree to these terms and conditions if I want to be part of this community and be one among them. Otherwise, it's not possible. Whether it is me being speaking English, knowing certain amount of urban metro culture, knowing about movies, things, that everything, and then some, whatever fancy stuff, and then certainly, of course, that at one level of class and caste and everything. At another level of transgender community, for me to be part of the transgender community also, oh, I wear sari, I don't shave my face, and they're very, very offended with that, which I rightfully understand. So I don't fit there also again. And then, okay, I mean, like, what am I exactly trying to do, or what exactly is happening? I don't fit there, I don't fit here, and I'm constantly searching for this sense of home somewhere. It could be anywhere, sense of home somewhere. To experience that I'm there, I'm accepted, I'm part of this, I'm not questioned and judged and all that, but that is not happening. And that at one level is another thing, and another level, the entire suffering what is happening within the communities, the constant blame we do is that, oh, state, government, society, heteronormativity, everything we blame, everything we say, which is rightfully so, we question, we challenge, because yes, state, system, structure, everything is structurally, systematically discriminative and violent. There's no doubt about it, and that is no new discovered fact. But what are we doing with whatever we are working on, that we are not able to create safe spaces for the people whom we call our people, for the spaces that we call our spaces are not really safe and are really not that inclusive as we imagine them to be inclusive. And when are we going to actually look into our own spaces and say that, oh, there's a lot to do with our own stuff? We don't do that. And whenever someone dies, you try transgender community, for example, there are enough suicides. I mean, people, I mean, instead of every time there's just before I left to Bodh Gaya, there was this young friend, I mean, queer friend of ours who killed himself, known for a long time, good friend of ours. And a lot of friends, for a year I wasn't there available. I was doing my whatever retreat of contemplation and solitude, and then I suddenly come back and this is what I see, and then everywhere, and I come out and into a community space after a long time, and then people ask me, oh, why did this happen? Why did he do this? This constant question is that, why did someone, I mean, a lot of people also do ask me the same question about, oh, my brother also killed himself. So they also ask me, why do you know, why did he do it? I'm like, I really don't. I mean, like, if I do know that he's going to do, any of my friend or my brother are going to do something like that, it would be different, I think, but I don't. And if you ask me now, do I know why did they do something like that? I don't. But is that the question what we need to focus on? That why? But should it be the question that where are we lacking as community spaces we claim to be, that they don't feel safe within their own community spaces, leave about state, government, and institutions, universities, and all that. They don't feel safe in the same spaces that we claim to be the inclusive and safe, and our brothers and sisters, whatever. And that introspection is entirely lacking, and I also felt this is not the work I wanted to continue doing anymore. And in the year long of whatever retreat, I continued reading, studying, and practicing my meditation, and finally decided, yes, this is probably what I want to do, and went on. And yeah.
One question about the community. Does the community try to help in terms of medical services or housing or even ration cards or even suicide counseling? Does it do any of these?
We haven't really reached at that level, because honestly, to say, as much as there are people who are willing to do that, there's no proper system as such. There's no proper way of doing things, because there is always continuously something is happening then that we are trying to respond to it. We are never like sitting back and say that we plan, strategize, because there's never that time and scope and space also, I believe. It is difficult in that sense, because there's constantly every day a new challenge that comes up in one or the other form, and you're busy only responding rather than sitting and actually making any kind of concrete plan. Say that, oh, I'll plan structure, I'll deal with this today, we'll have a mechanism for this, we'll have a strategy for this. Really doesn't. Yeah.
When you decided to become a monk, obviously you have been interacting with Buddhist sermons, Buddhist lessons, and everything.
Yeah.
Were you accepted there, or were
Okay, that's as much as I'm part of the Buddhist Sangha. My living experience with the monastic community is pretty interesting. As much as it is pretty challenging to me, I believe it is also pretty much challenging to the other monastic people who live with me. They
are you
find
the first one there?
I'm the first Indian, as they put it. I'm the first Indian male monk. I mean, that's how they put it. And the first moment when I went and started living in the center over there, so we have our prayer house. We call it Gompa, where we go do our everyday meditations, and classes also happen in the same Gompa. The first difficulty with the entire, and it was majorly nuns in the community, which I'm very happy about. But the dilemma is that, oh, who sits where? Because there is an entire order between hierarchical order between monks and nuns. So I'm supposedly a male monk, and they are supposedly nuns. Where do we sit? And they've been struggling. You sit here. You're supposed to sit first. I'm like, no, I'm new. I don't know nothing. I mean, I can't lead a prayer practice, whatever. You sit. They're like, no. I mean, like, you're a monk. I mean, like, you don't know, you don't understand. I'm not the man you assume to be the man. It doesn't work that way. And they kind of struggle, and then they need, what do you mean by it? Then I need to explain the entire thing, and how I'm comfortable with so and so pronouns. And in some of our prayers, we constantly refer to son of Buddhas. Then I had a huge problem. Like, what is the son of Buddhas to do with? I mean, there are no daughters. There are no one else other than sons and daughters. And then eventually, after 3 months, I think 3 months, 4 months, now they kind of children. That is what they use. I'm like very glad about that. And then there comes where most of the classes, the questions that I end up asking are very uncomfortable. They ask, oh, you're not supposed to ask such kind of questions. So it sounds, too not okayish, it seems. And then I'm like, why not? I'm like, I have a question I genuinely ask. So interesting also to look at, because within the Buddhist texts, when I've asked our main teacher, who was teaching on karma and one day, and I asked him that he's teaching sexual misconduct. What is sexual misconduct, and how do you basically keep your vows and precepts around sexual misconduct? And I ended up asking that, is homosexuality and homosexual relationships, are they considered sexual misconduct? Then he thought for a moment, and he ended up saying, yes, they are. I'm like, this is what he said. And I was like, okay, fine. Then I was like, okay, what about sex work? Someone who is into sex work as their livelihood. Then he's like, that's perfectly fine. As long as there is no violence involved in it and it is for livelihood, that's perfectly fine. I mean, like, they're entirely two different things. I mean, like, then later on, this teacher comes up to me and tells, no, I understand where you're coming from. And he's a Tibetan teacher. He's a Tibetan teacher who has not gone out anywhere, who studied in a monastic community, has come from Tibet when 14, and been here, misses his home, and and he tells me that I understand where you're coming from, but this is what is written in the sutra, and I cannot really change it or challenge it. But he goes on to say that this is not what we practice. We don't touch the sutra what says so and so stuff, but this is not we practice. So that is something interesting to look at for me. As much as I have a lot that I really rejoice studying and practicing as a Buddhist monk, there are things that I have huge problem with, which I constantly try to bring it up. And for rest of them is like, my question is like, Tashi is protesting now. I mean, like, I'm not protesting, I'm just asking a question, and this is what I'm supposed to do in a classroom as a student. So, and they are getting used to me, I'm getting used to them, but there is certain amount of hierarchy which I find difficult to understand. Because, for example, at any point of time, I offer, I mean, like, I manage a kitchen over there. I'm the kitchen manager in the center. That's one of the volunteer work I do. So whenever I offer food to anyone, it is supposedly not to the first person I see, but to the senior most monk who is sitting there. Now, how the hell do I know who is the senior monk over there? I mean, like, there are many monks, especially when a group of people sitting. I do not know who is senior, and I basically do not believe in the seniority of this at all. But, like, this is how we work. So it is difficult for them as much as it's difficult for them. But I can say is that in spite of that difficulty, what I appreciate with the center where I live, with all difficulties they have with me, they are loving and caring, and they still accommodate me and all my questions.
So you have transcended from a multicultural to a monocultural, but still hierarchical,
Yes.
sort of patriarchal.
Yes.
Uh,
Pretty much, not sort of.
but you do feel safe there.
I do feel safe because there is a scope to question, and I don't need to subscribe to everything they say. Like, for example, when I don't agree with certain pujas, I say I don't come and participate. I don't agree with certain recitations, I don't do, and that is completely agreeable. They don't compel me, force me that you are into the order, you are into the sangha, you are supposed to practice everything as we say. So that something gives me some space. And then, though they said that initially that we need to have a meeting to have transgender people come to the clinic and have the services, I mean, at least I'm fine, they're okay to have a meeting. We are sitting and talking, and we're talking to the rest of the doctors in the clinic and then the staff, how they're going to behave. Is it okay if they come? What do you think? So, I mean, there is a scope of conversation where we can take it to a next level, I believe. So that gives me hope, that gives me possibility
That
of
gives you
something.
space. That gives you
Yeah,
space,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
I think, is there anything else you want to
No.
talk to them?
No.
Because I want to open it up for questions. Because I know a lot of people would have a lot of questions, and I don't want to stop that and say, oh, time is up. So please, it's open for questions. Anybody wants to ask anything to Tashi?
Hi.
Yeah, hi. I think that you must speak about the conversation that you had with your father when you came out and the conversation that you had with the nuns at the monastery, because I think that that would uh, bring forth a lot of anxieties that people have, people that don't understand this, and especially the constant conflict homosexuality has with religion, where where most religions say that it's not okay to be homosexual even if it's consensual or whatever. I mean, they're just against that idea. So I think that you must. I mean, I guess it's a bit uncomfortable for you to speak about that.
No, not
okay.
really. Not really. That's fine.
Then I think you must speak about in detail about what that conversation was like, and I mean, I guess your dad's not okay with it yet, so I guess it didn't go as well as you planned.
Yeah, my okay. Well, there's conversations with my dad keep go on happening on and off from, like, I don't know, from past few years, and uh, they are still happening, I would say. So they haven't come to a conclusion, and I'm fine with having those conversations, and I don't really aim at having them concluded. I think as long as having conversations helps him, I'm perfectly fine with that. But again, to say this. as much as it's an upper caste, middle class family, but also mere completely Telugu speaking family, which doesn't have any kind of connection with English or the way, the entire LGBT terminology and, language is used around. So that is where a bigger challenge comes to either my father or mother or even me to have a conversation with them, I think. So most of that I believe that is also a similar challenge in a lot of families where English is not a speaking language, where it is a regional language, whether Telugu, Marathi, Kannada, where you don't have language around sexualities and other gender identities to be able to talk and uh, you can't really think of coming out if you do not know what to talk about and what to say about. I mean, when there is no language, when there's no narration, uh, the existence almost doesn't. It's not there. So that's the primary challenge, I believe. I mean, that is a challenge for the entire community to actually able to, because this can't be an individual job. This need to be a collective job where community need to think of coming up with language and literature around sexuality and gender in regional languages, so it becomes easy for people. And that there can be literature that I can, like my dad, like for example, asked me, this is completely like some Western bullshit and nonsense. That and this is not who are the Indians that are gay and that they are open and out. I certainly can't talk about Karan Johar on that. I mean, like, because he's not really open and out in that sense. So there are no Indians that I can point out and say they're not. I can't find out local figures say that, oh, they are gay, they're open and out, and it's okay. The people live lives. People have lives in spite of being gay, lesbian, transgender, whatever. So I think most of the parents' side, the problem is also their anxiety is also about how do you live life. I mean, what happens to you? As much as the fear is about social persecution, embarrassment, and social pressure, the fear is also about what happens to my child. Are they going to be safe in this world? Is also there, and I think for us also in our anxiety, we lose we miss to look at their anxiety of that. Their fear. So as much as their my not wanting to come out at some point of time comes out of the fear of not being accepted, will not be accepted and all that, their fear also comes out of not wanting to accept and trying to resist it, comes out of the fear of the kind of world we live in and what it means to live in a world being LGBT whatever that is not acceptable in a normal society, normal Indian society. So that way conversations, I'm like, even before when I told him that, see, I decided I'm going to get ordained, I'll become a Buddhist monk now. You don't have much of a problem. I won't be going around on streets and doing all kind of stuff I've done so far. My father was like, one last attempt before you go away, let's go to your doctor. That is what he said. I'm like, fine, let's go to your doctor. So he took me to this popular clinical psychologist in Hyderabad, where we went and sat. I think we had some 3 hours of conversation with him, where doctor tried his best to convince me how I need to come back into normal fold of the world, and I do not know what I'm doing, and all that. And then I'm like, end of the day, I gave, because I have language, whatever, and all that, I was able to talk to the doctor and say that this is not what you're talking. And then I pointed out, interestingly, a couple of his own colleagues or friends of mine who are completely okay with me. And then either you change your colleagues or your hospital that you're working in, or you stop telling what you're telling me. And then he eventually decided that no, this is not, I mean, you need to come, I'll do some cognitive therapy, this, that, blah, blah, and all that. That is where he come up. Then I said, I don't have any problem the way I am. My father has a problem. If you want to really help him to make peace with it, I'll be very thankful to you, is what I told him. And this, the conversation happened between 3 of us, my father, me, and the doctor. We all 3 were there and listening. And after the end of the conversation, my father was like, I mean, the doctor charged whatever the money I think he charged. He was like, he charged so much more because you're the one who's talking all the time. I'm like, I didn't ask you to take me there in the first place. So if he charged more, I can't help again. And then he's like, no, but so this doctor also ended up saying that all kind of stuff about, oh, we saw a trans person who came to us for counseling. We suggested not to go through an SRS. In spite of that, the person has gone through SRS and ended up committing suicide. Then I'm like, sorry, it is not because of the surgery and everything. It is because of the entire discrimination, violence that the person is put through in the society. So that my father caught on that and saying that, oh, but doctor said that there's a possibility of change. Then at that point of time, I really didn't want to continue the conversation. I think I said that at any point of time, my sexuality changes, by whatever the God you believe in or you pray for, I'll come back and I'll marry. This is what I said. Because he's like, can I have that hope? I'm like, if that hope makes your life better, please. I'm not saying not to have that hope. If that makes your life better, please have it. But wherever it changes, by whatever the God's grace you pray, I'm fine to come. I mean, I found at the end of, after 6, 7, whatever the years of the time to having conversations with him, finally found that this is where it is better. To tell him that, okay, if my sexuality changes, I'll come back and marry. That is something which he keeps asking every day, almost. He calls whenever I'm in Bodh Gaya, I'm doing whatever practice I'm doing. I'm a Buddhist monk, and he calls me up and asks, anything happening? I mean, like, okay, this is getting onto my head now. So I don't know. There's no one way of dealing with this, conversations with your parents, I think. And the amount of pressure also LGBT community asserts and coming out, I think there's a huge problem with it. People not necessarily need to come out. They don't need to be pressurized to come out. It's an entirely individual thing. Whether it is all the way to Karan Johar or anyone in Hyderabad, if you want to come out, come out. If you don't feel like, don't do it. You are not obligated to do it for any so-called greater good of the community and all that. It's not your job at all. And because we don't live in such a kind of world, if you not coming out makes you feel more safer, please be in that safe space rather than entirely getting into a terrain which you are not so prepared about. So, and that's another way about having conversations with nuns and all that. Well, the people ask me different questions. There was a monk who asked me at once, oh, did you become a monk because you love wearing saris, because robes are like saris? I mean, like, probably yes, I did. So, and then there's a nun who asks me, what genitals do you have? I mean, like, okay, I mean, like, I don't think I really want to talk about what genitals I have exactly at this point. So there are all kind of conversations possible. There is no one way of going it. Of course, there is anxiety around it. There is fear around it, because there is also fear of losing space. Even in the Buddhist community, I'm part of. Oh, what if they throw me out? I need to be prepared.
So, yeah, my question was not just about people who are in the LGBT community who need to come out to their family and friends. It was also about people who are not and just need to create awareness so that even people who are not directly in the crosshairs, they understand the issue and not discriminate against people. So, I mean, that was the reason I asked you to elaborate on the exact conversation that you had, how it went, so that maybe people could pick up clues from it, like what you mentioned about people thinking it's quote unquote Western, quote unquote new. So, I mean, if people know that these are the kind of anxieties exist and how to deal with that in speaking to people in general, like it doesn't have to be a person who is gay or, I mean, who is lesbian, who needs to tell their parents about it. Even people in general who are not, who just need to tell their parents, like, like you guys need to not discriminate against people who are.
The only way is to have conversations, and as I said, there is no one way of having conversations at all. Everyone from different backgrounds have different conversations, and they all need to figure out, keep talking. I mean, like, as much as people over here keep talking about it in as many places as possible, and at as many venues as possible. And there is no one straight way again of dealing with entire, because experiences are different, realities are different. So that way, I don't think there's one way of creating awareness. There are multiple ways of creating awareness about it, and we all need to keep doing our part. Again, the responsibility is not again on the LGBT community alone, not on just the activist community, not just on the government or state. It is a collective responsibility if we aim to have a collective change in the entire society we are living in. I think it's time up.
Really have to intervene
Yeah.
here, because these are, I think, a lifetime of questions, and we only have 2 days to spark them off over
But
here.
just let me conclude one last word.
Sure.
Okay. I think he has very clearly said that we need to do what we can and how we can, how comfortable we are. And the fact that he is so optimistic and is so cheerful tells you that, if you really want to negotiate space, you have to do it from a point of conviction, and then you can really change the world. Maybe bit by bit, but yes, we can. And negotiate our own space. whether it is in the society here or in a Buddhist monastery. So thank you very much for being so eloquent and
Thank you for having
clear
me,
about it.
and I'm happy to have conversations aside. I'm going to be there around. So, yeah, I'm happy to talk around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.